I like all of those topics. Have you got anything to share on the topic of SEO, search engine optimization?
I do, as a matter of fact. One of the things I like about Michigan SEO Group is we have regular meetings with our staff to talk about what's going on in the world of SEO in general, with our clients in particular. And our very own Daniel J. Holland III was bemoaning the fact that people use WordPress and that it's always a mess. And the only question is how big of a mess it's going to be. And he had picked something that was a huge mess. And then he ended with a statement that said, it's probably possible to set WordPress up correctly, but no one ever does it.
Right?
And the reason for that is because WordPress makes it easy for people who don't know a lot about web design and development. It allows them to make websites. But the question is, do you want somebody who doesn't know a lot about web design and development to be building your site? I would propose the answer to that is no.
And the thing is, with Wix and WordPress, you can make them look good fairly easily without ever having inquired at all into the architecture of said site or the text in the URLs, right? Or quality of links. You can just go, I have a beautiful website and I'm happy. And in fact, that seems to be what most of the people that use WordPress do.
Yeah, in addition to WordPress is this open source thing, so they pick that, and then they have to pick a theme that somebody else makes, and sometimes you have to pay for that theme, and then WordPress itself doesn't do what you want it to do, so then they have to get this plugin, and that doesn't work, so they have to get some other plugin, and they get some other plugin, they get some other plugin, and all of these things can have security vulnerabilities and holes in them. And if you just update WordPress, you also need to update your theme. You update the theme, then it breaks the plugins, and the plugins, this, that. Um, there's just websites that list all of the thousands of vulnerabilities and problems with security with WordPress and all the plugins. And not to mention, it makes obviously we acknowledge that it can work. It's just whenever we get a WordPress site, nobody seems to have done it correctly. It's possible to, I'm sure, but just nobody ever does it.
You know, you're absolutely right. There's two other things that happen. One of which is, the whole point of things like WordPress is it's supposed to be easy, right? Oh, I can have a nice looking website without much trouble. But as I was talking about in our earlier meeting, some people do that and they get in there and they get halfway through the process and they either think they're done or they just give up or get too frustrated. And so we get these people calling us saying, hey, my website's terrible. I'm not getting any results from it. And therefore, I need a new web provider, and they call us, and we solve the problem for them if they are interested in doing business with us. But that's a thing where the convenient option is offered to them, and they don't even do that well. So then they have this travesty of a website out there that people look at that probably in this day and age drives business away from them. It doesn't even capture the business that they already have. In fact, the person I talked to this week said, well, most of the people I get at, knocking on doors and, putting out flyers, and I just want the website to be a brochure. And I had to say, well, listen, that's all well and good, but the brochure you got right now is scaring people away. Nobody's calling you after they see that. And he's like, I know. So that's part one. Part two is, let's say you do a decent job or you hire one of these companies that says, oh, for $80 a month, we'll build you a really simple site based on WordPress or Wix, and we'll make sure it looks okay. Well, they do that. And they'll give you a 3-page site or a 6-page site if you pay $87 a month or whatever that is. I have some friends that run companies like that. But they don't do SEO and they don't do site architecture. And when you think about how much you're paying them, $80 in this day and age is not enough to pay a well-trained white collar worker for even an hour of their time. So are you seriously contemplating the idea that you're going to have a robust, well-functioning website that does all the work you want it to do for SEO and attracting customers with one of those? No matter how good those 3 pages might look, they're just not doing it for you.
Well, the other problem with that is, and it goes back to day one when people come in and they say, I want a website, and I want it to look like this, and I want it to say this. And then as an afterthought, they say, oh, is it going to show up when people search? No, it's not going to show up when people search. There is an art and a science to that. And if that's the priority, you need to start building that in from the very start and work with a company who specializes in that. Because who cares if you have a website if it doesn't show up?
Yeah, this is a whole bunch of technical mumbo jumbo to some people. Here's a question I wouldn't mind chatting about from an entrepreneurial perspective. It seems to me that there are really different entrepreneurial outlooks. And a lot of the people we end up talking to are people who come in and maybe they're good at what they do. They start doing it and then they make a business out of it. Then maybe they get a website on the cheap or whatever. But they just seem to have this reluctance to make the commitment they need to go from working, like uh living paycheck to paycheck figuratively, right, as an entrepreneur, like doing enough work to get the work done, getting just enough to keep the pipeline full, doing that work pretty well, but not great, but never really taking the risk to like systematize their business or taking the risk to uh spend the money on enough digital marketing to grow. And then there's this other type, and it's mostly who ends up doing business with us, and those are people who see the future as a brighter opportunity and they do take risks and they do spend more money. I know it sounds self-serving for me to say, oh, people should spend more money on digital marketing, but I think the subset of entrepreneurs that we've worked with over the years is big enough now to be able to make some generalizations about that. What do you think about that idea? Don't you think there's kind of two classes of people? And I don't mean that. I'm not judging people on a personal level, but two classes of entrepreneurs. And one of them is willing to take more risk and spend more money early to build. And they seem to do just a lot better in the long run.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to a couple of things. One is if paying somebody $80 a month was enough to get you to number one on Google, everybody'd be number one, right? But
Hmm.
there's only one number one, and it ain't going
Hmm.
to be the guy paying $80 a month, probably.
Right?
Um, and then the other thing, yeah, there's people who just they want to do everything themselves, so they're going to use Wix or WordPress, and they're going to do that themselves, and then they're going to like install their own alarm system themselves, and they're going to do this themselves and that themselves, and it's just taking them out of the business that they're supposed to be doing. Like if you install alarm systems, great, you should be installing alarm systems, but if you're running a plumbing business, turn the website and the alarm system and everything else over to people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. And even if that you're probably underestimating. And if you think, oh, I can do my own digital marketing and I'll just do an hour a week. Now, the truth is, most of the people we talk to, even if they think they're doing an hour a week, they're not, right? Or they're doing it badly. But let's say they do. But the problem is it never contains itself there. If you're really going to get good at it, you dig in. You and I have a mutual friend who's an architect, and he's very smart. I'm sure he does great architectural work, but he gets immersed in these projects at home. He decides to do his own replacement windows or something like that. And then the people that work with him, who we also happen to know, are like, fucking darn guy is never around because instead of doing the architectural work, he gets immersed in this house project. And so instead of doing the work that he could earn whatever, 300, 400, $500 an hour for, he's at home doing his own replacement windows that he could pay somebody else for, right? And with one hard week of work, at his real job, he could pay them and they'd probably do a better job because they do it all the time and he has to learn it while he's doing it. I don't know. It's a mindset and I don't know. I don't want to be a know-it-all. I'm sure we could be a lot better at our businesses too, but it sure seems like a lot of people should do a better job of isolating what they do well, sticking to that, and hiring out the rest.
Yeah, true. It's just like, you start a business and you probably have more time than money. So that's probably why people try to do a lot of stuff themselves and avoid spending the money. Later, as you're growing your business, you probably have more money than time if it's a successful business coming in. Like you can't take, 20 hours out of your month to be doing digital marketing or doing other things, right? You're better served by focusing on your business and selling and things like that. So time versus money, as you start moving up in the world, you're going to have less time, and it makes sense to leverage other people's expertise in many
Yeah,
cases.
expertise is a good point because if they're in that market and you do your diligence as far as finding out who's supposed to serve you, they're doing it all the time. So they're going to have all the little tricks of the trade. They're going to have the supplier relationships, right? The tools. We just had a new sink put in at home, and I've known the guy for a long time, and he's a real craftsman. An eccentric guy, but he does the work well. And our goal was we had this old sink that was starting to look kind of bad. By the time he was done, we have a beautiful sink that looks great, but it also works well. And not only did he replace the sink, but he went underneath and he redid all the plumbing underneath the sink and the plumbing from the dishwasher. And so now that thing that was a tangled mess under there, and you had to have a bucket propping up this thing and that thing, it's like all perfect. My wife raves about how much cleaner and better the dishwasher is. Like, right? Having that guy come in, it was more money than just buying a sink, but you know what? It's worth every penny. Would I do it again? 100%. He knows what he's doing. We picked the right guy. That's a success story in that department.
Speaking of expertise,
Yes.
there's a difference between what I'll call fancy book learning
Mm-hmm.
and real world experience.
Yeah, you got
Like,
examples?
well, so I'm interviewing people for a network tech position, and this guy comes in and he claims he has like 3 certifications in network security. And so I go through this list of skills and I ask them to rank themselves from 1 to 10. 10 meaning they know all about it, and 1 meaning they know nothing. And I get to a point where I say, well, what do you know about like network security? Let's say an accountant calls you and they have an office with 10 computers, and the IRS told them they need to get serious about security. How on a level of 1 to 10, what do you think you'd be able to do there? And he goes, 4. I said, you just told me you have 3 certifications in network security, and you have no idea what to do when this accountant calls you and says, I need to know more about security. So he's got all his book learning, he's got his certifications, but he's never done anything with it in the real world. And when I'm like, well, what would you do? And he just couldn't answer and tell it, like, didn't even have a plan or couldn't come up with anything.
Fancy book learning.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, it's a good start. I remember I had fancy book learning in the Japanese language, and then I moved to Tokyo. And after 3 months, one of my Japanese friends looked at me and he goes, you know what? I can hardly understand a word you say. I was like, what? He goes, you talk like a textbook. I go, okay, that's a difference. That's directly fancy book learning versus experience, where, a year later, just been in conversation with people, I was able to talk more or less normally at that point.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with learning and reading books. You have to do it, but you also have to make it work in the real world too.
100%. Well, speaking of the real world, without fuel, we can't function. And we get to pick the kinds of fuel we want in life. And I know I like to fuel myself a large percentage of the time with products made from tasty beef. Have you got any stories you want to share about steak and margaritas?
As a matter of fact, I do.
Ooh.
I think I've told you this, but I don't think I talked about it on the SEO podcast. Um, Someone had invited me to do something. Like, I was talking to him on Friday night, and he's like, you should come over tomorrow night for dinner. Your wife's out of town. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then later he texted me and said, oh, it's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be Sunday. I'm like, it took a little luster off it because now it's a school night and I have to leave. And I'm like, all right, yeah, fine. And then it just turned out that he never got back to me. And Sunday afternoon, the clock's ticking. I'm like, as much as I would like to go out and see my bud here, I'm so happy that he didn't text me, he didn't call me. I don't have to leave. I don't have to go anywhere. So once I realized that was my situation, I start rooting through my freezer, and I'm like, what can I find in here? And I found this Delmonico steak that I had purchased from, I think it's Westergaard Farms or something. I don't know if I've told this story or not, but my buddy had told me that Tippin's Meat Market, that's a great place to, it's a party store, but they sell meat. I'm like, it's a party store. What? He goes, no, you should go there. So I went there. I finally got around to it. I'm walking around and I don't see any meat counter. And I asked the lady, she goes, oh, we haven't had sold meat here since before COVID. You should go to Westergaard Farms down the street. I'm like, okay. So I hop in the car and I go to Westergaard Farms and I pull in and I walk in and the lady goes, can I help you? I said, yes, I want to buy all of your steaks. But I'm seriously, I said, I want to buy all of your steaks. And she goes, oh, good. I think we have 2 left. So I'm sure I ate one right away, and this other one's been sitting in my freezer for, I don't know, a year or whatever. It seemed fine. So I took it out, and it's not particularly thick. So doing the reverse sear, and it probably wasn't in the cards. And it turned out Sunday was a really nice day. So I'm standing out on the deck in I jokingly say my boxer shorts. I was just wearing my little shorts and whatever. And I'm flipping this steak back and forth on the grill, sipping a beer and having a great time. And it was delightfully delicious. I used the Sam the Cooking Guy flip often method.
Interesting.
And a little salt, pepper, garlic, and a little of that Weber's Cajun seasoning.
And it was good.
It was good, and I was happy as a clam because I didn't have
I
to go
like
anywhere.
it. It's always nice not to have to go anywhere. I was in the freezer last night or the night before getting out some chicken wings, some lemon pepper chicken wings that everybody in our family likes and they're easy to cook. Um, and I saw sitting there wrapped and waiting for me a tomahawk steak. I was at, I think it was Costco of all places, and they're having a special on them. You get two in one package. So the day I did it, I think it was at lunchtime, I bought a whole bunch of meat, and that was one of the things I bought. And I immediately cooked one of the tomahawks, and it was wonderful. But I just wrapped the other one, tossed it in the freezer, and it was sitting there squeaking out this little song. And the song was, "You really need to cook me this weekend." And so I pulled that sucker out, and it is in the refrigerator thawing. And tomorrow it'll reach room temperature, at which point it will be spiced and appropriately dressed, and then it will find its way probably into the oven for the sear. And then I'm hoping, if the weather's not too terrible, that it will be finished on the Weber grill with charcoal, and it will be delicious. I promise you that.
Look at you, Mr. Fancy Pants. King Henry VIII eating a tomahawk steak instead of a turkey leg.
Do we actually know what King Henry VIII ate?
I
Is it
read
was it all that Victorian stuff with the like crow pies and fancy things you see in the paintings, or what?
I think so. Didn't he end up with gout?
Well, I mean, a lot of royalty ends up with gout because they ate way too much fancy food, right, all the time. And then you had to run around. You don't get much exercise when you have other people cutting your wife's heads off. So I guess you end up with gout,
I guess so.
which I understand. It's quite painful. I've never had gout, but I don't, I wouldn't prefer it. Any other big plans for this weekend? Steak and margarita wise?
Well, I have a Snake River Farms tri-tip Wagyu sitting in my freezer.
Yes, you do.
Now, this is a moral and philosophical question.
It is.
It's a Wagyu, so it should be cooked. The purists would say you should reverse sear it, medium rare, and be happy that you're eating the delicious tri-tip Wagyu steak. But I happen to know that if you put that tri-tip in your smoker and leave it for 4 or 5 hours, it turns out just like a delicious brisket. And would the Wagyu-ness make it even more delicious?
I think the answer to that is yes. And I think you owe it to yourself, to me, and our vast international listening audience to do that shit, take pictures, and give us a report, because everybody wants to know how good that tri-tip will be after you cook it like a brisket.
I'm almost positive it will be delightful.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I would love to find out how that thing turns out.
You take it out of the smoker finally and you put it down on the table and it sits there jiggling.
Ooh, all the fat and loveliness. Man. Well, sir, that just means we are going to have to reconvene at our next opportunity and discuss the results of said tri-tip.
As long as the weather doesn't sideline me, I think it will happen this weekend.
Sounds wonderful. I look forward to hearing the results next time.